Find out how I got a working brake booster and master cylinder finally, despite the fact that I had all these problems, including a vacuum leak between the master cylinder and the brake booster, a cheap aftermarket fluid reservoir that simply would not install because of the poor quality. And then finally, I broke a hard to find part, which is the brake fluid tube that goes between the reservoirs. So stay tuned. Like I mentioned before, I want to test this vacuum booster to make sure that it actually is sealed and can hold a vacuum. This is a very expensive part. I'm hoping it does. If it doesn't, I'm out a couple $100. I was going to use maybe the pump to do it, but then I purchased this guy right here, this tool here, and this is a vacuum brake bleeding kit. And it's from Mighty Vac. I think Harbor Freight sells this, but I ended up for $45, but I ended up getting it on Amazon for $32 direct from the manufacturer. So I'm not sure if it's good or not, but what I'm going to do, I'm obviously going to use this because I got 4 cars, and I'm going to be eventually bleeding brakes, of course, on the van, on the Volkswagen, but also on my other cars too, so I figured I might as well get this now. But the other thing I thought I could use this for is to test this guy. So let's see if we can do that. Well, it turns out rigging this up I don't think will be that hard. I cut off like a 3-inch piece of vacuum tubing and put it on the nipple here on the brake booster. This kit comes with tons of different types of fittings here, and I found this fitting that can transition from the tube, the clear tubing, into this. So I'm going to put this inside here, and that should be, yeah, it's pretty tight. And I'll hook the clear tubing up to it. It doesn't appear to be able to hold vacuum. Well, it turns out I don't think it's my brake boosters leaking. I sprayed a little bit of soapy bubbles around where the master cylinder fits in, and watch. Oh, let me see if I can get it in frame. I didn't buy the wrong part, so that's not the problem. It's not that this one's cheap or fake or wrong or whatever. I mean, the problem here is that you have this little bit of rubber here that's supposed to seal this thing only around here, and there's not much to, I mean, you can see there's like less than a 1/16 of an inch even protruding above, above here. And then you have a nice brake booster, but yet it's a little bit pitted around the lip. The old master cylinder was rusted onto here, and that's basically what sealed it in. But everything else about this thing, I mean, if you look inside, I don't know if you can, probably camera can't get it, but it's shiny, nice metal inside there. The thing seems to work really well. I mean, I hate to buy, it's not that I'm cheap and I don't want to spend money on a new one, but the problem is when I looked at the new ones, the research, the aftermarket ones, people hate them. They say they don't last. And to get a good one, it's about $300. So I'm going to attempt one last thing to make this guy work. And so we're going to try this. Permatex Ultra Gray. It's basically an RTV, a silicone-based RTV gasket maker. Now, the reason I chose this, the other thing I might try is putting a thicker O-ring in place of this gasket here. But I think the better thing to try is this. Now, when I was doing some research online, a product like this, a silicone-based Permatex product like this, is typically used for vacuum gaskets. And this one, the only thing the Ultra Gray adds to it is it's a little bit high-end for high torque and high vibration applications. So I figured I'd get the step up from the stuff, the silicone-based RTV stuff that they use for vacuum applications. So I think what I'm going to do is just put that all over around here, even up to the rubber gasket here, and see if that will make a vacuum tight seal, because I just hate to throw this whole thing away and spend $300 if, you know, I can possibly solve this issue. So let's I'm going to go ahead and give it a try. We'll see what happens. Okay, well, it's been 24 hours, and here's the test. So just to recap, I replaced the thin little gasket on the master cylinder with a bit thicker of a O-ring, just give it a little more oomph, and still soft, and then used the Permatex Ultra Gray all around the rest of the flange, you know, including all over the O-ring. So here we go. All right, we'll stay there. Well, I checked out for about an hour. It stayed steady at 10 inches of vacuum. I read online that the vacuum pumps typically need about 18 to 20 something, maybe 18 to 22. And so I'm just gonna, it was quite a workout to get that much out of this little brake bleeding gun. So I put it at 15 and I'm gonna let it sit there for a few hours. But so far this is looking really good. We sat overnight at 15 inches of vacuum, and we still have 15 inches of vacuum, so I'm very happy with this. Not a very scientific way of fixing things. I did two things at once, so I don't know if it was the larger O-ring or the RTV sealant. I just did both of them. I probably should have done one or the other, but I don't really have time to experiment with this. I just want to get it working. And I also can't vouch for the reliability of it, so we'll just have to see, but I'm moving forward with this. Well, so far everything I've tried has failed. I've you know, try to put those things on here, it wouldn't push in. Same thing. The plastic is just too weak for the force that you need, and these things just start pushing in. So who makes this part? AirTech. I end up having to cut these off to get my rubber things back off. I put them back in here. So this is junk, brand new part, junk. So AirTech, don't even bother. If you can't make your plastic strong enough, don't even make this part. So I went and cleaned this out, my old one, a lot. You know, obviously it can't get clean, but I cleaned it out on the inside, jetted out with a bunch of brake fluid or brake cleaner, and so we'll go with the old one. I didn't really need to replace it. I just thought to get a new clean one, but should have known. Aftermarket parts, junk. It's the story of our lives. Anybody who's doing automotive stuff. All right, let's see how the stock tank can put up with the yeah. Okay. There and there. I mean, I just wasted, I don't know how, 30 minutes on an aftermarket part that was never going to be able to install anyway. Gosh, when I could have just stuck the stock one on in 2 minutes. There you go. All right, well, that's one lesson for us all. Don't use the aftermarket tanks. Okay, so we're all set up here. All right, well, I think I didn't get much done today, but here's what we're at. Here's where we're at. We have the proportioning valve installed. I've got the little spacers in here, and then there's the master cylinder brake booster. I had to move the brake light switch from here to here and put the plug in over here, because if the switch was here, it was bumping the emergency brake line, which, if I remember correctly, in the original master cylinder, that there was like an offshoot, you know, instead of a rear threaded opening, there was an offshoot right here that went diagonal, and that's where the brake thing was. So I put it in the end. I think that's right for how you want to do that. Yeah, so it's installed. All the brake lines are nice and smoothly threaded in, installed. Hopefully there's no leaks. We'll see once I start bleeding it. I can't finish it because notice I'm missing the feed line from the secondary reservoir up to the other one. Notice I did replace with this nice new hose for the vacuum line. I was going to do the same thing for that, and then I realized, oh crap, I don't know what kind of tubing material, because it was like a plastic, I don't know what kind of tubing material is safe for brake fluid. So I got to do a little research on that, or just order another replacement part. Yeah, so that sucks. So anyway, but that's where I got. So as I'm researching what kind of replacement material or line I need to use for this brake fluid reservoir filler, I took this one out here, and I painted. What did I do? I didn't pour 15 this. I just I used a rust converter, and then I just sanded it down real good and cleaned it, and then just shot some paint in there. It was pretty rusty in there, and I figured, while I have this out, I might as well rust proof and paint in there, so when I put it back, I'll finish the rest later, but this will be my opportunity to do that. Well, hopefully this is the last of the brake booster master cylinder saga here. This is the line that goes from the the first reservoir up in the cabin to the reservoir on top of the master cylinder, and I just ripped it and bunged it up real bad, so I have to replace it. But that was really dumb of me, because I just thought, oh well, I've got some vacuum tubing, I've got some other type, I've got vinyl tubing, I've got lots of different types of tubing, I'll just replace it with that. Then I did some research, and not a good idea. Brake fluid can eat rubber. So there's a very special type of synthetic rubber, I think it was called EDPM rubber or something, that you can use for brake reservoirs, but not fuel line and not vacuum hose. And then I also had this vinyl tubing, which I used. I had a piece of this because I used this in plumbing for little output drains, but I couldn't find anything that said vinyl tubing was good, or clear tubing. I don't know if that matters if it's clear. So putting that aside. So what I ended up finding, I got this on Amazon, I'll put a link to it, but I bought a meter of this for about $11, $12 or something, so it wasn't too bad. This is nylon tubing, and this said that it was made for brake and hydraulic fluid transfer. So this synthetic nylon tubing should be just fine with brake fluid being in it all the time. Well, just finding the right kind of tubing is not enough, right? Because this stuff is rigid plastic, just like this. So I found the right material, but my problem now is that hard 90 bend just can't be done by hand. I mean, this stuff, it just won't bend, and there's not much room under the car, so I need this pre-bent so that it basically pre-bent and pre-cut, because there's really not a whole lot of wiggle room here. This thing is rigid, so you can't flex it, roll it. It has to be kind of in the shape and in the size that it needs to be kind of before you put it in. So one of the problems, though, on the test piece I did, was I ended up melting it, because I was like, okay, so I need to bend it. Well, I'll just heat it up with the heat gun and bend it. And what inevitably will happen is you'll crimp it and then melt it. So what I'm going to try now is put a spring inside of it. Now these things, I'll show you one that I've owned for a long time. This is a 1/2 inch, I think it's 1/2 inch, copper pipe bending. No, sorry, this is 1/4 inch. So usually what you do is, you know, for plumbing, you would buy something like this in the plumbing section of the store, and these are meant to slide over the pipe. So I'll put the pipe into there, and then you can make your bends. And this is for I think it's a 1/4 inch outer diameter copper tubing, say like a refrigerator ice maker line. You put it in there so you can make nice tight bends without crimping the copper. Well, what I found was hobby stores sell smaller versions of these tubings for the same purpose of going around something, but these are much thinner and lighter than my plumbing one. I think these are made for like train set enthusiasts or people that are, whatever, bending copper and aluminum tubing for train sets and things like that, I think. But anyway, they do have it at the hobby store. Now I found this one, I think it's 5/16, I want to say, but you could buy a pack of these at like 1/4, 3/16, 5/16, 1/2 inch, and this seems to fit just about perfectly inside of this 11 millimeter inner diameter tubing, and it has a nice flare at the end too as a bonus. So what I'm going to do is I inserted it all the way in here, and I'm going to use this to basically heat it up, bend it by hand, but with that spring inside there that should retain the it shouldn't crimp it. So let's see how it goes. I don't know. This is not easy, but I'm almost there. I heated up the material, the tubing, and I used like graduating levels of things that I've just found in my shop, like nut drivers and sockets. And I finally got to expand and swage, the end to make it look like the original, right? Because it's swaged at the end, and that's because these soft rubber pieces are what actually seal it. So I need to use these soft rubber pieces in my tubing, and I assume this is the correct brake fluid compliant rubber. But so I need to swage the each end so I can fit this tubing inside there, and it'll clamp onto those just like they did from the factory. So, well, I got the brake fluid line, transfer line put on, got the reservoir put back in, and hooked up a bunch of the stuff underneath, the brake push rod and all that stuff. And I also put some .3, about a third way full, and so far everything's holding, everything's good. Well, that wraps up this video. On the next video part, we'll be working on the rear brakes. We're going to be doing all the typical stuff like replacing the hardware, the shoes, the soft rubber lines, and even the wheel cylinders. But when I opened one of them up just to see what it looked like, this is what I saw. I was not expecting it to be this bad. Not only do we need to replace everything inside here, but the backing plates are rotted. The adjustments are all frozen and seized. It needs new wheel cylinders, needs new pads, and it not only that, but the bearings were so bad that they were making a grinding noise. So not only that, but I had to pull out the stub axle, and we're gonna have to replace both the inner and outer bearings and repack them and do all that. So it's gonna be a bigger job than I thought on the rear, so look forward to that, and as always, subscribe to follow the project. Thanks for watching.